Hey, what's up, guys? This is Cody the Coin Raptor. Happy New Year's to everybody. I hope you guys are having a fantastic new year. I've got 5 Bitcoin bullish catalysts for 2024. I want to go ahead and go through my expectations for the new year as well as the Bitcoin price. But before we get to that, be sure to subscribe, be sure to hit that like button, and be sure to follow me on X as well. So we're going to go ahead and get right into it because I have a lot I want to cover today, and I think this is probably one of my most important videos that I've put out since I've started the channel. So we're starting with number one, the Bitcoin spot ETF approval. All right. So a lot of people have been talking about a Bitcoin spot ETF. I've covered it many times on the channel here, but this still remains the number one catalyst for 2024. And the reason for that is because you're now taking Bitcoin mainstream to traditional buyers, to traditional markets, traditional financial markets, and now you're putting it in a more digestible form for traditional investors. Now, instead of having to actually buy and then custody that Bitcoin, then they can just buy a spot ETF instead and get exposure to Bitcoin. So I've talked many times about what I think that this demand will be like for Bitcoin once that spot ETF gets approved and how that'll affect the price. Definitely recommend you guys check out my video I made on that. But my take on this idea here that we're going to get approval before January 10th, I'm a little skeptical personally because the SEC has been very hostile to Bitcoin and very hostile to crypto. And I don't think we're actually going to wind up seeing this ETF approval until either there's a change at the SEC through the next elections, or we get new regulation that basically compels them to act on a spot ETF. Now, we have seen many different bullish catalysts on this story. We've seen the SEC lose lawsuits against Grayscale, for instance. They've lost lawsuits against XRP as well. So the SEC is kind of hurting right now. And I really don't think that they're going to go ahead and approve a spot ETF before January 10th, even though there are some rumors here, like for instance, what Reuters put out, that that they could have this done during, say, January 10th or so. Now, the SEC did tell those ETF applicants that they needed to make some final changes. They've talked to a lot of those companies, such as ARK and Grayscale. But that being said, I'm just very skeptical in seeing this. And you know what? Could be wrong. I definitely hope that I am wrong, and we'll wind up seeing that. But if it does happen, my other point is going to be that most likely we've priced in a significant amount of the optimism for that kind of event. Now, really, what this means is that we've seen Bitcoin accelerate. All right, going from 25,000 during the summertime all the way up to 44,000. A lot of that was on the basis that we'd see a Bitcoin spot ETF. So I think that even if we do get approval, I think Bitcoin's going to wind up selling off, at least in the near term after that event happens. And then after that, we're going to see a boost in the actual demand and then a boost in the Bitcoin price. All right, so let's move on to my number two, which is going to be the halving. Okay, you guys already know the halving is going to be happening next year. That for sure will be happening. And if we go ahead and take a look at our Bitcoin, let me refresh this, our Bitcoin halving clock, we can see here that it's currently set up for April 17th of 2024. This is at buybitcoinworldwide.com/halving. And they've set this up that we will basically wind up seeing a halving in almost about 100 days or so. Now, the reason why this is important, okay, is because Bitcoin's cycle is built around the halving. You know, the miners' rewards for Bitcoin gets cut in half, and as a result, you have less Bitcoin entering the market, and you have as long as demand stays the same, that means you should have an increase in the actual price itself. So we know that this is going to happen, okay? It's already programmed into the blockchain. But just like I said for the Bitcoin spot ETF, I do believe that actually when it happens, because people know it's going to happen, we're going to actually wind up seeing a sell the news type of reaction to that, at least in the near term. And then we're going to also have months of sideways price action. So if you go ahead and take a look at our previous, if you look up and you take a look at the Bitcoin cycle and you look at our previous halving events that are outlined here in the blue, so you have the blue that transitions here into the red, we can see that usually you have a few months of just sideways price action where Bitcoin doesn't tend to really do anything. And there's a little bit of a run up all the way into the halving itself. And then you have a couple of months of sideways price action. And then after that, that's when you finally start to see the price move up. So as an example, we had the halving back in May of 2020, and we didn't actually reach the next top of the bull market until November of 2021. So we had a long ways to go, basically, from the halving to the next bull market top. And the time in between that we saw here, we can have it's about, what would you say, about 2 months or so. About 2 months of sideways price action before we wind up actually seeing the price accumulate and move much higher. So even though this is a bullish catalyst for Bitcoin, this is not going to result in explosive price action overnight. Everybody knows this is coming, and most likely the price will run up to the halving. It'll sell off when the halving actually happens, and then we'll probably wind up seeing a couple of months of sideways price action, and then after that we'll wind up seeing a boost in the actual Bitcoin price, because that's honestly how it's happened in the past. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is Fed rate cuts next year, okay? This is also something that's likely to happen. In fact, if you take a look at the CME FedWatch tool, you can see here that they're kind of expecting this for about March or so of 2024. All right, they're expecting rate cuts, or at least the first rate cut, to happen in March, and that's going to be about a 25 basis point rate cut. All right, so I've talked multiple times on this channel about how the Fed funds rate affects Bitcoin, but to keep things brief, as the Fed funds rate goes up, Bitcoin tends to go down because Bitcoin is a commodity, right? And the dollar tends to strengthen in times of uncertainty, and the Fed's usually raising rates, and that also affects the price of the dollar. As the price of the dollar increases, Bitcoin tends to go down. But the whole idea here is that Bitcoin does not like a tight environment in which the Fed is raising rates and money's becoming more expensive. Okay, so I made a whole video on that. The relationship between the Fed rate, and Bitcoin itself. Definitely recommend you guys check that out as well. But this is a very likely event to happen this year. I personally, for the base case scenario, I'm expecting about 0.75% decrease, or 3 rounds of 25 basis point cuts this year, okay, 2024. And it's entirely possible that we'll actually see more than that. If the economy doesn't hold up during the year, we could actually see more of those cuts happen. And Bitcoin tends to do very well when the Fed is cutting rates. As an example, we can go ahead and take a look at 2020, which the Fed cut rates pretty sharply, and Bitcoin took off like a rocket ship after that happened. Okay, so that's the expectation for next year. The Fed's going to cut rates, and so-called speculative assets do tend to do well during those Fed rate cut cycles. Now, number 4 I want to talk about is going to be record cash on the sidelines. All right, so last time I checked, and I try to get more of an up-to-date number on this, but this is the best I can find. But MarketWatch basically did a report on almost $6 trillion in cash in money markets, according to Janus Henderson. And this is really important. Now, people tend to think about those money market cash piles, how they're going to affect the traditional markets. But we need to realize that it's not just limited to the traditional markets. It's going to be an all-encompassing effect. It's going to affect stocks. It's going to affect bonds. It's going to affect real estate, and also crypto as well. Now, I don't expect $6 trillion is going to go into the crypto market. I think that's really unrealistic. But even if a fraction of that goes into the crypto markets, we could see a huge impact on the crypto markets. Even if we're taking $500 billion, okay, and we're putting it into the crypto markets, that's still enormous, all right? So there's definitely going to be some of this money moving out of the money market accounts and moving into Bitcoin and crypto assets as well. And I do think that'll actually wind up fueling part of a Bitcoin um, resurgence this year. And the other important part of that is that if you take this and you combine it with my number 3 here, you realize the fact that if the Fed's lowering rates, that means that the money market accounts become a lot less attractive. Instead of getting 4 or 5% in a money market account, you can wind up getting 2 or 3% instead. And then especially if things start running, if crypto starts going up, if stocks start continuing to go up, then we're going to wind up seeing people FOMO. And people do this every single time because people are incredibly emotional about their money. They will FOMO during a bull market, okay? So all it takes is a little bit of a catalyst, and now all of a sudden you have a lighted match to a just to gasoline, right? And then you see a huge move higher as people actually start moving that money out of those money market accounts and into assets like Bitcoin. Now, that kind of tied to that, I've also put election years tend to be very good for the market, and that's true for traditional markets, also for Bitcoin as well. You guys remember during 2020 and 2016, during presidential cycles, Bitcoin tends to do very well. And my expectations for this year are no different. Now, there's also another important part of this I want to talk about, and that is the stablecoin market cap as well. Now, stablecoins have gone all the way up to about $128 billion. So even if you think that, very little of that money is going to wind up touching crypto, just know that there are people sitting on the sidelines still with $128 billion worth of stablecoins waiting for the next bull market, waiting for the next all-time high in order to see that as a signal. There are people who like to buy the breakout, right? And so as Bitcoin goes to 69K and breaks out to the point, they will wind up putting more of their money in, okay? So even if you don't believe that some of that money will go there, there's $128 billion of stable coins that could be going into Bitcoin or altcoins, and then also pushing those prices up as well. Now, the next thing I want to talk about, number 5, is Bitcoin ordinals and NFTs will drive demand during the next bull market. So this is something that we saw during our last bull market. We had the NFT fervor that kind of went through the bull market. People were buying Bored Ape Yacht Clubs, NFTs on Ethereum, but we could wind up seeing something similar like that happen for Bitcoin as well, because now Bitcoin, you have ordinals and you have those NFTs, those non-fungible tokens, and they have actually been a strong driver so far of the demand for Bitcoin, and especially the activity on the blockchain itself. In fact, we had a very interesting report here by CoinGape that said that they had a record December. Now, according to data from CryptoSlam, the month of December 2023 witnessed an unprecedented surge in non-fungible token sales on the Bitcoin blockchain, reaching an astounding total of $881 million. Okay, so this is the highest single month sales record for NFTs to date with Bitcoin. And this is just the beginning, quite frankly, because there are many people who are looking at NFTs. They're interested in NFTs. Maybe they're not too excited about Ethereum, or they want an alternative to Ethereum instead, and they just happen to be Bitcoin maxis. Now, they're going to wind up using NFTs, and especially ordinals, to mint tokens and conduct all kinds of activity on the blockchain. I do believe that this is going to be a major catalyst in 2024 and 2025 in order to actually boost the price up much higher and have a higher activity on the blockchain as well. So people are going to be looking at things. They're going to be taking those use cases that Ethereum has and applying it to Bitcoin, and Bitcoin will be the beneficiary of that transition. Now, my own take here is basically that adding more cases, adding more use cases to the Bitcoin blockchain will increase the price because it'll increase demand for Bitcoin. However, it's also going to increase the network saturation and the fees that we're going to see for Bitcoin. So that's the other side of things. As you have a larger amount of network traffic and demand, you also have a larger Bitcoin fees in order to meet the demand. So that's going to be just kind of a side effect that's always going to be there as Bitcoin tends to increase in price and tends to become more widely used. You're going to wind up seeing higher fees. You're going to see more network saturation as well. And that's going to be just a side effect of what we see for Bitcoin. So now we're going to talk about probably the point that you guys have all been waiting for, and that is my price expectation for the end of Bitcoin, for the end of the year for Bitcoin. So what we're looking at right now is two different scenarios. Scenario one, Bitcoin spot ETF is approved this year. That would be about a $70,000 price target for Bitcoin by the end of the year. That's my expectations. Now, if there's no ETF approval, I think that we're going to hit 60K by the end of the year. And I think that's a relatively conservative number. I think basically what I'm giving you here are conservative numbers because I don't want to go and say Bitcoin's going to hit 1 million, right? Or Bitcoin's going to hit 500,000 or anything like that. I want to be conservative here because it's definitely prudent to be conservative when we talk about price action and price targets. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but 60K is my price target if there's no ETF spot approval. Now, if there is an ETF spot approval, we'll see 70K or around that by the end of the year. And the reason for that is because we'll have a larger demand coming in for Bitcoin if we get a spot approval. If we get a Bitcoin spot ETF approval, we will see more demand for Bitcoin and thus higher price appreciation by the end of the year. Now, I also want to go ahead and talk about my expectations for the Bitcoin cycle as well. So normally, as I said before, Bitcoin has topped out about 18 months after the last halving. Now, that happened May of 2020 to November 2021. And if that same pattern holds, we can expect a new bull market top in October of 2025 if the halving happens in April of 2024. Now, what this kind of looks like here is we have the previous halving right here, May of 2020. And then we have the peak here in about November of 2021. That would, again, put us at about October, September or so of 2025, okay? So, again, remember that the largest price action tends to happen during the end of the year runs, after Bitcoin's halving, not in the immediate aftermath. So, my expectations for the Bitcoin price, again, going to be at about 60K at about right here by the end of the year of 2024. And then as we move into 2025, that my expectation would change, that we'd actually surpass the all-time high and then head into 100K at the very least. I think 100K, 110, 120, somewhere in that region. That's where we're most likely going to find the new Bitcoin top in 2025. So let me know what you guys think. I'm definitely curious of hearing how you guys feel about the bullish catalysts that I've outlined in this video. And if you think that the price target could also be, somewhere in the ballpark of what I've been talking about here by the end of the year, and then next year, what your expectations will be for the Bitcoin price, leave a comment below, and I will catch you guys in the next video.